welcome to the Children's Story Hour. Today we have a wonderful story for you. It's all about Ferdinand Archstuffer Truemaster, who's the fattest cat in the whole world. I'm going to read the story, and Mr. O is going to help tell the story too. Because after all, stories are a lot more fun when we can see what the characters are doing. And Nick is going to play along too, because music can tell stories and make them that much richer and more fun. And then there's Tara, who will keep things moving along, and Annie and Devin. And of course, you. And you're the most important person of all, because where would a story be without a listener? So we hope you enjoy it. Now, as I said, Ferdinand Archstuffer Truemaster was the fattest cat in the whole world. He was so fat that it took a half an hour just to pet him all over. He was so fat that you could barely see the tips of his front paws when he was lying down on his huge tummy. He was so fat that if you watched him making his way back to his favorite ottoman by the front window after dinner, he looked like a fuzzy yellow wattle beast. Waddle to one side, waddle to the other, and waddle back again. Sometimes it took him as long as 10 minutes to make the trip. And sometimes, the way he was listing, you weren't sure he wouldn't just topple over sideways and not ever get up again. He was so fat that the Webster people thought of putting his picture in the dictionary next to the word fat. Ferdinand Archstuffer Truemaster looked like a yellow fur meltdown. He wasn't always that way. There was a time when he was just a little tatter of yellow fur, a floppy rag of tabby stripes, when he came to live with a nice couple on the hill who thought he was a dear, sweet, poor little thing. Poor little thing, said the man when he found him on their doorstep one rainy summer day. Oh, dear little thing, said the woman. And the very first words out of the sweet little thing's mouth were, I want to eat, meow, meow. I want to eat, meow, meow. Poor little thing, said the woman, he's so hungry. So they gave him some milk and a piece of fish. But when he'd lapped up the milk and finished the fish, he said, I want to eat more, meow, meow. I want to eat more, meow, meow. So they opened a can of tuna and gave him some bits of bread, more milk, and a piece of cheese. And while he was eating that, the woman said that she thought Ferdinand would be a nice name for him, so that's what they called him. And when he was done and had licked the bowls clean, he wiped his mouth with a swipe of his paw and began again. Please feed me some more, meow, meow. I'm still very hungry, meow, meow. So the woman and the man gave him some porridge, a slice of cooked flounder, a small piece of steak, some caviar left over from a party, chopped chicken livers, and day-old spaghetti. And while Ferdinand was devouring all of this, the man said, maybe we should call him Ferdinand Archstuffer, because he certainly is good at stuffing his mouth. And sure enough, Ferdinand Archstuffer ate it all, left not a drop, took a brief nap, and started all over again. I want to eat, meow, meow. I'm still very hungry, meow, meow. The couple practically cleaned out the cupboards to feed him. He ate canned sardines, anchovy paste, some jalapeno peppers, which did make him belch quite vigorously for some time afterwards, celery soup with croutons, a piece of cantaloupe, some grapes, the bits of a leftover mayonnaise and peanut butter sandwich. When he'd eaten the peanut butter, his song went something like this. I want to eat, meow, meow. I want to eat, meow, meow. But that didn't last too long, and soon he was quite back to normal. Then the woman said that she thought his name should be Ferdinand Archstuffer Truemaster, because he was indeed an archstuffer of food and a true master at the art of eating. And then she said, we can call him by his proper name. And from that day on, he was simply known as Fat. And Fat got fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter. Every day they would haul him outside to the front yard, and he would lie about in the sun for a while. The other animals in the neighborhood all made fun of Fat. Sometimes the local birds would pull out some of his fur to make their nests with, or peck at him and laugh. Sorry, Fat, we mistook you for a suet ball. And they would twitter and sing, for everyone knew that Fat couldn't move his body fast enough to catch a turtle on a slow day going backwards. Fat pretended he didn't mind all that much, but of course he really did. The kids made up songs about him. Fat, 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 and ugly. Boiling for blubber and selling for oil. Ugly, ugly, ugly and fat. Blubbery, oily, disgusting old cat. Elephant legs, elephant legs. Poor old fat's got elephant legs and a walrus body and a rhino head. He's so fat he ought to be dead. Passers-by would sometimes stop and comment, "Look at that cat. I do believe that is the fattest cat I have ever seen. Poor thing, I wonder how he gets around." Or sometimes people would just look at him and then look away, embarrassed, and hurry on by. Then there was Jane Aerobicat, the fitness feline. She would come by and grab a handful around Fat's middle. "Why don't you come and enroll in my classes," she would say. "You won't live very long with all that extra poundage, you know." And she would shake a well-trained and very fit front paw at him. Fat would get all flustered and embarrassed and wish she'd just go away so that the man and woman wouldn't see her and get any ideas. And of course, the squirrels weren't the least bit afraid of Fat, for they knew he could never get up and chase them. So they'd sit nearby and chatter about him. "You know, Sam, if we could just figure out a way to get him into our hole in the tree, he'd last us for a couple of winters. Yep, we could slice off a little bit of him at a time and spread him on our nut biscuits. The only trouble is it would take a crane to move him, and I ain't talking birds." And Fat would lie there with his eyes closed and pretend he didn't hear them. But of course he did. And only sometimes at night, when he was all alone, a big fat tear would well up over the edge of his very fat eye and plop down over the edge of the ottoman. It would make a small wet spot that would be dry by morning. When he wasn't out sunning himself or eating, which took up a good part of the day, he lay on his ottoman and slept or gazed lazily out at the trees in the sky. It was a very low ottoman, for Fat couldn't possibly jump up on anything. One day when Fat was lying there with one eye open and the other half closed, he happened to see a cat he had never seen before race up the tree in the front yard and stretch herself out along one limb. Fat opened both his eyes wide, which was not all that easy considering that even his eyelids were overweight. And he looked, and he looked. The cat in the tree was black. She was ever so slender, with lithe muscles and elegant, long, graceful paws, a regal head and large green eyes and delicate pointed ears. Her whiskers were long and thin, with just the faintest trace of gold light on them. She was beautiful. She was magnificent. Fat was spellbound watching her. Suddenly, she leapt from one branch of the tree to another, and faster than his eye could follow, she was nearly up to the top of the tree. Her long black tail leisurely swept back and forth as she lay down again, quite at ease and quite in command of the world, like an imperial ruler surveying her realm. Fat just stared and stared up at her in the tree until his fat eyelids were aching. And then, as suddenly as she had come, she raced down the tree, leaping from one limb to the next, landed on the grass, and was gone behind the house. Fat lay there in a trance, not sure whether what he had just seen was real or not. He couldn't wait to be taken outside to find out who she was. He did something he had never done before. He asked for something other than food, in an urgent, moaning sort of voice. "I want to go out. Meow, meow. I need to go now. Meow, meow." That's a strange kind of sound for Fat to be making. "I think it's the first time I've ever heard him meow when it wasn't for food," said the woman. "Maybe he's sick," said the man. "Let's take him outside." So they did. Fat lay in his usual place in the sun and waited for somebody he knew to come by. There was nobody around. And then suddenly he saw her again. She was coming towards him with a curious look on her face. Fat wanted to die. He wanted to disappear into a hole in the earth, except that he realized it would take a backhoe to dig a hole big enough for him to hide in. He felt like crying. He sighed so heavily that the black cat came closer and looked at him. "I beg your pardon," she said. "Did you say something to me?" "Oh, no," said Fat. He cleared his throat and then said so softly and with such humiliation that the black cat had to lean forward to hear him, I saw you in the tree, and Well, welcome to the neighborhood. My name is Ferdinand just Ferdinand. He was so embarrassed that he would have turned and run away if he could have. My name is Sleek, she said. Veronica Sleek. It's nice to meet you, she added kindly, but I must be going now. It's almost dinner time. And she smiled at him, a sweet smile, a smile that would stay imprinted on his heart forever. And she turned and ran off to the other side of the street, leapt up to the top of the stone wall, and disappeared down the other side. Watching her move with such speed and grace almost gave Fat a heart attack. In fact, his poor fat heart did skip quite a few beats before it calmed down enough so that he couldn't hear it thumping anymore. He lay there as the sun dropped slowly behind the trees and it began to get dark. He was completely unaware of the passing of time. He just lay there staring at the bit of the wall where he had seen her disappear. He tried to turn his head around to look at himself. He couldn't turn it very far, but it didn't prevent him from seeing all too much of himself. He shook his head slowly from side to side, and a big tear bubbled up out of each one of his eyes. For he knew that a gorgeous, lithe, beautiful young cat like Veronica Sleek could never love a cat as fat and ugly as he was. He put his head down on the tips of his front paws and stared off into space. Soon it got really dark, but he didn't notice, and he didn't care. "Oh, my goodness," said the woman, suddenly jumping up from the chair where she was knitting. "We forgot all about Fat, and it's dinner time. I do hope he's all right." They went out and found him lying desolate in the same spot they laid him. "Oh, I do think he's sick," said the man. "Well, there's one way to find out for sure," said the woman. "If there's anything in the world that will perk him up, it's food." They brought him in and set him down next to a big plate of his favorite bits of beef and brown sauce. He just lay there and stared at it. "I can't eat. Meow, meow. I'll never eat again. Meow, meow." "Oh, he is sick," said the woman. "I'll call the doctor," said the man. And he did, and they took him in the back of the station wagon to the doctor. He examined him all over and tested his heartbeat and took some blood. Fat lay in a lump on the table, his eyes half open, his head on his paws, and didn't move. The doctor came back in and said, "Well, I can't find anything wrong with him, except, of course, for the fact that he weighs about 10 times as much as he should. The tests all came out fine. I suggest you take him home and keep an eye on him, and if he gets any worse, give me a call." The man and the woman were very worried about Fat. They took him home and made him a special dinner of chicken soup, but he didn't even lift his nose to sniff it. "I can't eat. Meow, meow. I'm so much in love. Meow, meow." And for days and days, Fat just lay on his ottoman and stared listlessly out the window. Usually once a day or so, he would see Veronica Sleek race by, or catch her sunning herself atop the stone wall across the way. And he would sigh deep, long, heavy sighs and put his chin back on his paws and stare. At night, he would dream about her. In his dreams, he would be slender and strong, and they would run together through the forest. He would nuzzle her neck with his nose, and she would purr and gaze at him with those huge green eyes, with a look of pure love and admiration. Then he would feel as though he could fly. He would leap ahead and beckon her to follow him. And then he'd wake up and find himself lying in the cold, dark night on his ottoman, all alone and fat and ugly. This went on for weeks. The man and woman made him all sorts of special foods and yummy dishes, but he'd have none of it. He'd drink a little water, sniff the food, and go back to his ottoman. When they tried to take him outside, he complained and fought terribly, so they finally stopped. The man and woman figured it was because it was so cold and snowy outdoors. The reality was that Fat just couldn't face being outside where Veronica might see him. He preferred to watch her unseen from his ottoman. and sigh and dream about her. One day, as Fat lay there on the ottoman, he began to get anxious. It had been 3 whole days since he'd seen Veronica. Sometimes 2 days would go by, but never 3. He watched and watched, but saw no sign of her. Night came and no Veronica. He didn't sleep all night long. The next day he thought surely she would come. The hours dragged by and the sun came and went, and no Veronica. Another sleepless night. By the time morning came, he was in a state of panic. Suppose she'd moved away. Suppose she was hurt somewhere. Suppose she was dead. This thought plunged him deeper into despair than he had ever been. He decided he had to go outside and see if any of the other animals had seen her. He knew they'd make fun of him, but he didn't even care. It was worth it to find out what had happened to her. He crawled down off the ottoman and was surprised that he didn't fall with the usual hard thump. He walked down the hallway towards the front door, realizing that walking seemed easier than it usually did. He came to a new floor-length mirror that the man and woman had installed, and he stopped and looked into it. As he was standing there, the woman came along and looked at him in the mirror. "Well, well, Fat, you're finally off your ottoman, are you? Huh, you're not so fat anymore either, are you? In fact, you are downright thin. Oh, dear old Fat, I don't know what's wrong with you and why you've been so sad, but it certainly hasn't hurt your waistline. You look wonderful. Come on now, old boy, I think it's time you went outside for a bit. The snow's all gone and it's spring. It's high time you go out and get a whiff of the fresh air." So the woman opened the door and set him down on the porch. Fat looked up at her. She had always carried him down the steps before. "Go along now," the woman said. "You don't need me to get you down those steps. You're skinny enough to run right down them all by yourself." Fat looked at her and at the steps and walked over to them. He looked down and could actually see his feet in front of him. He walked right down the steps without any trouble. He started to walk a bit faster, and it was easy. So he started to run and discovered that he could. Then he stopped. He was a little weak from no exercise. He sat down and looked around the yard. The sun was shining, the earth smelled rich and full. Here and there, little crocus heads were pushing their way through the soft dirt. Fat spied a bird sitting high up on the branch of the big maple tree at the end of the yard. Maybe if he could get close enough, he could ask the bird. He crouched and began to slither towards the tree. When he got close, he made a dash and leapt to the trunk. He made it up about 2 feet and then stopped. His 4 legs were splayed out, his claws clutching at the bark of the tree, and he hung there. Finally, he let go and fell down. He backed off and looked at the tree and tried again. This time he made it to the first branch. But in the meantime, the bird had flown away. But he was actually up in the tree. He had made it. And the world sure looked different from up here. He jumped down from the tree and went to look for Veronica. She wasn't anywhere to be seen. The first creatures he came across were the 2 squirrels. They started to run away when they saw him, but he called to them, "Oh, please, please don't run away. I'm looking for Veronica Sleek, the lovely black cat who was here until just a few days ago. Have you seen her?" The squirrels kept a good distance, but stopped when he called after them. "Are you a relative of Fat's?" they asked. "You look sort of like that old bag of blubber who lives here, but you sure ain't him. He's the fattest cat in the whole world." Fat smiled to himself and said, "Yeah, I'm related to him. But what I'm wondering is if you've seen Veronica." The 2 squirrels snickered. "Oh, her," said one of the squirrels. "Yeah, we know where she is. They came and got her in the paddy wagon and carted her off to jail. She's a no-good tramp, that one." Fat jumped and moved so fast the squirrel didn't have a chance. Fat was even more surprised than the squirrel. He caught him and held his neck down on the ground with one of his front paws. "You take that back," he growled. "Veronica's no tramp. She's the most beautiful cat in the whole world." Okay, she's not a tramp," whined the squirrel. "Please, let me go." Fat released the squirrel's neck and he ran away. But as he ran away, he yelled back, "But tramp or no tramp, she's still in jail." Fat sat down and tried to sort all this out. He was amazed himself at how fast he'd caught the squirrel. He'd never caught anything in his life that he could remember. But that wasn't important. What was important was that Veronica was gone and she was in jail. Jail? There was no way they could put a beautiful cat like Veronica in jail. She could never have done anything wrong. He had to find out what happened. He walked and he ran and he climbed the trees and looked and looked. He covered every block in his neighborhood. He almost got hit by a car when he ran across the street without looking where he was going. And the more he ran, the stronger he got. He stopped at the schoolyard where the children were playing and looked to see if maybe Veronica was there. A pretty little girl came over and petted him. "What a beautiful cat," she said. "Beautiful? Me?" thought Fat. "Nobody's ever said that before." "I think I'll take you home with me," said the little girl. But as she tried to pick Fat up, he slipped away and ran on down the street. He wasn't going home with anybody until he'd found Veronica. He ran through people's yards and past strange houses and had no idea where he was. Pretty soon it started to get dark. Still, he kept on and on. He asked everyone if they'd seen a beautiful black cat, and nobody had. The moon came out. It was very late. He was so tired, he had to rest for a bit. He found a place behind some old garbage cans and slept fitfully for a while. And when he woke up, it was morning, and he started searching again. Soon he was all the way downtown. There were lots of people and cars, and it was scary, but he kept on going, looking and looking. Finally, he stopped to ask an old cat who was sleeping on a bench in front of an apartment building. "Pardon me," said Fat politely. "Have you by any chance seen a beautiful black cat with green eyes? Her name is Veronica Sleek. I was told that she might be in jail, but I can't believe that's true." The old cat opened one eye and stared at Fat. "Nope," he said. "I haven't seen anyone matching that description. And if I had, I might not be sleeping so soundly on my bench, so it's probably just as well." And he closed his eyes again. "Oh, dear," said Fat. He was getting so discouraged. Nobody had seen her. "But," said the old cat, opening one eye again, "you might go down and check at the pound. She might be there." "The pound? What is the pound?" said Fat. "Well, to us cats and dogs, it's about the same as jail. It's down the street another block." "Oh, thanks very much," said Fat, and hurried in the direction the old cat had pointed. Fat ran the whole block and came upon a brick building that had a big front door and two small windows, but they were too high up to see into. He watched for a few moments, but nobody came in or out. Then he decided to go around to the back to see if he could find a way in. There he found a big yard with fenced-in runs. There were lots of dogs and puppies running around and barking, but he didn't see any cats. Maybe inside, he thought. "I've got to get inside and see." He went back to the front door and waited. Finally, he saw somebody walking up to the door. He followed them in, and when they opened the door, he sneaked in past them, saw a long, dark hallway, and ran down it, hoping that nobody had seen him. There didn't seem to be anybody around, but as he approached an open doorway, he heard voices. There now," said a man's voice. "Another couple of minutes, and it'll be all over." "It's such a shame," said a woman's voice. "She obviously was quite a lovely cat. It's just awful that people move away and leave their animals behind without even caring what happens to them. But she's been here a week and no one wants her, so I guess we really don't have a choice." Fat peeked around the door and saw a table that two people were standing beside, and on the table was Veronica. The man was holding her and just about to stick her with a long, awful-looking needle. Fat went berserk. He let out a battle cry and leapt up onto the table. The man was so startled he dropped the needle. Fat jumped on the man, his claws flying in all directions. He was like a yellow tiger tornado, a fury of yellow fur and teeth and claws all attacking at once. "Run, Veronica, run," he yelled. Veronica was kind of weak and dizzy, but she managed to jump down off the table. Fat leapt after her. "Run," he said, "follow me." He ran back down the hallway towards the front door. Oh, but it was closed. There was a counter at the far end. "Hurry," he hissed, and the two cats jumped on the counter and down behind it. It led into another hallway. They could hear the man and the woman coming after them. "This way," said Veronica. "This goes to the outside." At the end of the hall was an open door. The two cats raced through it, but outside there were chain-link fences all around. "Come on," Fat said, and climbed the fence. "There's got to be an opening somewhere." Veronica followed him, and they climbed and raced. They went over one fence and down the other side, only to find themselves in a room with a Doberman pincer who stood below with bared fangs, barking and waiting for them to come down. They finally climbed down into an empty run that bordered the street. The man and the woman, seeing where they were, ran around to the entrance. The run was fenced over at the top, no way out there. So they both began to dig as fast as they could in the dirt at the bottom of the fence. They had just about enough space to squeeze through when they heard the man coming down the run. "Keep digging," Fat yelled, and he went after the man. He jumped right onto his chest. When the man threw up his arms to protect himself, he slipped and fell in the soft dirt. Fat looked over to see that Veronica was just squeezing through under the fence. "Come on," she called to him. He jumped and ran to the opening. It was too tight for him. The man was on his feet again and coming for him. Fat struggled and pushed, clawing with his powerful back feet, and just as the man reached for him, he squeezed through and was out. He saw Veronica across the way and ran to her. "Follow me," he commanded, and she did. It was just like in his dream. He ran, and she was right there beside him. They ran all the way back to his yard. When they got there, Fat dropped down, panting, exhausted, and Veronica lay down next to him, shivering and weak. Fat looked at her. She was thin and straggly looking. Her coat was no longer so sleek and shiny, but she still had the most beautiful green eyes he had ever seen. "You saved my life," she said, looking at him adoringly. "You look so familiar. I know you from somewhere." "Of course, you're Ferdinand. I wondered what happened to you after we met." He nuzzled her neck. No one had called him Ferdinand for a very long time. He looked at her lovingly and then said in a gruff, manly sort of voice, "Come on, you need a meal." Arching his back and looking absolutely magnificent in the early spring sunlight, Ferdinand A. Truemaster stretched his lean, muscular body and beckoned Veronica Sleek to follow him up to the front door of the house where the man and the woman lived. "Please let us in. Meow, meow. Veronica's hungry. Meow, meow." When the man and woman heard them, they hurried to the door. "Oh, thank goodness you're back. Where have you been? We've been worried sick about you. And where in the world did you find this poor little waif?" The man and the woman let them in and fixed a nice bowl of milk and some food, and both cats ate their fill. But Ferdinand left a little bit in his bowl when he was done and said to himself contentedly, "I don't want to be fat. Meow, meow. I'm a very happy cat. Meow, meow." We hope you enjoyed our story, and we hope we'll see you again real soon.